I've always enjoyed working the night shift. Something about the quiet, the solitude. It's peaceful, calming even. I work as a night security guard in a deserted office building, empty floors and echoing hallways as far as the eye can see. It's a simple job and most nights pass by without incident. But there was one night, a night I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday, and I had just finished my usual rounds. I returned to the security desk, settled into my chair, and was flipping through some notes when I heard the faintest sound, like someone tapping. It was so soft, I thought it might just be the air vent, but something about it was off. Curious, I stood up, flashlight in hand, and began to follow the noise. The building was completely still, the only light spilling in from the occasional exit sign in my flashlight. As I made my way down the hallway, the tapping grew louder, almost rhythmic, like someone drumming their fingers on the glass. I rounded the corner to the conference room, where the sound seemed to be coming from. As I slowly opened the door, my flashlight beam landed on an empty room. Empty chairs, an empty table, no sign of anyone. Just the quiet hum of the building. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. There on the large glass window overlooking the city skyline were handprints. They trailed down the glass, pale and smudged. My heart skipped a beat. Those prints hadn't been there earlier. I was sure of it. I took a step closer, inspecting the handprints. They were small, like a child's, each one smeared, like someone had been pressing their hands against the glass, dragging them down. I couldn't explain it, but a chill ran down my spine. I left the room, shaking off the feeling, and returned to my desk, trying to focus on the security cameras. Hours passed, and I convinced myself that it was nothing, a trick of the light maybe. But then the sound came again, only this time it was louder, closer, like it was just outside the door. I rose from my seat, flashlight ready, and slowly opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the sound continued, moving down the hall as if beckoning me to follow. I walked carefully, listening as the tapping became muffled, as though it was coming from behind the walls. I reached the stairwell and paused. The sound was echoing from below, as if someone was tapping against the stairs themselves. I took a deep breath and started down the steps, the sound growing louder with each step, and that's when I saw it. Just for a split second, a shadow at the bottom of the stairwell. It was gone almost as soon as it appeared, vanishing into the darkness. My heart was pounding now. I reached the bottom, flashlight sweeping the area, but there was no one there, only the dim, empty floor stretching out before me. I felt an urge to turn back, but something made me press on. I continued down the hallway, past empty offices and darkened windows, until I reached the building's basement. The light in the basement was dim, barely illuminating the cold concrete floors and rows of abandoned filing cabinets. I took a few steps forward, my flashlight casting long, eerie shadows. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I whipped around, shining my light down the hallway, but no one was there. I could feel my skin prickling, like someone was watching me. The footsteps grew louder, echoing around me, but I was frozen, unable to move. The lights began to flicker, casting the room into darkness before flashing back on. And in one of those flashes I saw it, a figure standing at the end of the hallway, cloaked in shadow, just watching me. Its face was obscured, but its eyes, they seemed to glow, 2 points of pale, ghostly light in darkness. I stumbled backward, heart racing, when the figure took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The lights flickered again, and when they came back on, the figure was gone. I ran back up the stairs, not daring to look back, each step echoing louder than the last. When I finally reached my desk, I collapsed into my chair, chest heaving. I looked at the security monitors, expecting to see an empty hallway, but there it was. The figure, standing in the middle of the basement hallway, staring directly into the camera, as if it could see me. I watched, horrified. As it moved closer to the camera, its face just a dark blur, and then static. The screen went blank. I leaned back, heart pounding, and that's when I felt it. The cold chill, the sensation of someone standing behind me. Slowly, I turned around, half expecting to see that figure, but there was nothing. Just the empty lobby, silent and still. I barely slept that night. The next day, I tried to tell my supervisor, but he just brushed it off as exhaustion, maybe even a prank. But I know what I saw, and every night since I've heard that tapping, faint but there, as if whatever it was still watching, waiting.
I never used to believe in the supernatural, not until that night. Working the night shift as a janitor at a small, underfunded hospital, I'd gotten used to the long, empty hallways and the occasional strange noise. I used to joke with the nurses about ghosts, but I always thought it was just that, a joke. But one night, it all changed. It was close to midnight when I finished my usual rounds, pushing my cart down the dimly lit hallway. The halls were empty, the only sounds being the faint hum of machines and the echo of my own footsteps. I was cleaning a small, rarely used wing of the hospital, a part reserved for patients in palliative care. Most nights, the wing was empty, and that night was supposed to be no different. As I was mopping the floor, I heard a soft, distant sound. At first, I thought it was one of the other janitors, but when I looked down the hall, it was empty. The sound grew louder, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails on glass. It seemed to come from one of the patient rooms at the end of the hall where the lights flickered faintly, casting strange shadows on the walls. I felt a chill creep up my spine but brushed it off, telling myself it was just an old building with old noises. I walked down the hallway, the tapping growing louder with each step. When I reached the door, I hesitated, holding my breath. Slowly, I pushed it open, my heart pounding. The room was empty, just a standard hospital room with a bed and a chair by the window. But as I stood there, I felt an undeniable presence, like someone was watching me. That's when I noticed it, handprints on the window, faint but visible, as if someone had pressed their hands against the glass from the inside. My heart raced. No one had been in that room for days. I took a step back, trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe just marks left by a previous patient. But something didn't feel right. I left the room quickly, almost running back to my cart, eager to finish my shift and get out. Just as I was about to leave that wing, the lights flickered again, and I heard a soft, eerie whisper behind me. "Help me." The words were barely audible, but clear enough to send chills down my spine. I froze, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned around, expecting to see an empty hallway, but instead, I saw a figure at the far end, a faint outline of someone standing there, unmoving. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette of a person, watching me. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the figure. As I moved, the figure took a step forward. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The figure moved closer, each step slow and deliberate, until it stopped just a few feet away. In the dim light, I could see it more clearly. A woman, her face pale and expressionless, eyes wide and hollow. Her gaze seemed to pierce right through me. Suddenly, she raised her hand, pointing down the hallway, her eyes pleading. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice filled with sorrow. I didn't know what to do. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Slowly, she lowered her hand and turned, walking through a doorway and disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, shaken, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to follow her, to see where she had gone, but every instinct told me to leave. I forced myself to turn around, practically running down the hallway, desperate to get back to the main floor. When I finally reached the lobby, I found one of the night nurses, breathless and trembling as I told her what had happened. She looked at me with wide eyes, her face pale. "That's impossible," she whispered, glancing toward the hallway. "That room, no one's been in there for weeks." I told her about the figure I'd seen, the handprints on the window, the whispering. She shook her head, looking more and more disturbed. "There's something you should know," she said softly. "A patient died in that room a few weeks ago. A woman. She had no family, no visitors. I heard she spent her last moments asking for help." The nurse and I stood in silence, the weight of her words settling over us like a heavy fog. I felt an intense sorrow mixed with fear, like I had somehow brushed against the edge of something beyond this world. From that night on, I never went back to that wing alone. And sometimes when I'm cleaning the main hallway late at night, I swear I can still hear the faint sound of tapping, like someone knocking on the glass, hoping to be heard.